Recording. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm very happy and privileged here to be on a webinar with Donna Ingillo of the Center for Christ Consciousness. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, Alfred. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
for having me.
It's your webinar. It's our webinar.
Our webinar, right?
And this webinar is an outgrowth, really, of many of the places that we've been touching on, and the specific focus is on spiritual and planetary circuit activation. And that is, if we look at the dimensional ecology that the planet Earth is in and that we are in, because we are in a universe, multiverse, and omniverse, which is an ecology of dimensions with and it's an ecology of dimensions of intelligences and entities, and most of which are unseen. And so Donna came forward with a very interesting concept that I'm going to let her explain, really, because it's very subtle and very delicate, but very powerful as to what is occurring now in these times here on Earth. And we'll be looking at it in the context of these times and in the context of spiritual and planetary circuits at the personal level as well that are being activated, and how we can tune into them and join in this awakening and empowerment that is coming our way. So, Donna, I'm just going to turn it over to you and to take us forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alfred. I'm so happy to be here. So what I think I'd like to start out with is the idea of perspective. I've been watching a lot of Alfred's shows for the few years now, and I have heard many speakers talk about the various perspectives of what they see happening on the planet, from the political perspective, religious or theological perspective. Today, what I'd like to offer and share is a perspective that is a little bit of a broader context. You might call it a universe perspective, and what is happening to our planet in this time of great change and transformation. But first, I'd like to give you all a little bit of my background, just to get to know me. My name is Donna D'Angelo. I'm the founder of the Center for Christ Consciousness. And this is a spiritual ministry of healing and transformation to help people connect to their internal spiritual and deity sources that are hardwired into our system of consciousness. I am a very long time student of the Urantia book, being studied the book in many times in depth over the last 40 some years. And it was around in the early 90s when I started to make contact with the higher realms and began to transmit some spiritual teachers who had messages of hope for us, because they're coming from the context of the planetary rehabilitation time that we're now in, called the correcting time. This is a massive spiritual rehabilitation program designed to return us to the divine plan of evolution. the Urantia book, as a epical revelation, goes into quite a bit of detail about the process of evolution and how planets evolve from a raw, primitive culture to a heavenly culture reflecting the divine ways and the divine universe of which we are all a part. Many years ago, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, our world participated in a very massive event called the Lucifer Rebellion. And during that time, the head of our system of associated planets by the name of Lucifer and his associate Satan conspired with our spiritual head of the planet, whose name was Caligastia, to take us on a path that deviated from the divine plan of evolution that followed the universal laws. So when that event occurred on our planet about 250,000 years ago, our planet started on a deviant course to evolve humans to a different way of life, that the rebels felt that they could actually achieve a divine plan better than the divine plan as it was laid out and given to them by our creator parents. So what we're in the midst of now is a massive outworking of this Luciferic influence and agenda. And this influence is threaded throughout every institution in our planet. And this is a big deal. It's almost like the elephant in the room that people aren't talking about because no one really understands what's happened to our planet and why it's in the shape it's in. But in the Urantia book, there is a very comprehensive story and information about what happened to our planet and why it's in the shape it's in, and what the actual divine plan to evolve planets is of the heavenly order, so that we can get ourselves back on track. So what we're in the midst of now is this massive sorting of the ways. It's a time, a period, wherein we are being given a choice. If we still want to maintain this Luciferic agenda and mindset, which at its core is self-centeredness, or do we want to develop our spirituality and make contact with the spirit within and develop our relationships with our deity creator parents so that we can receive the divine patterns that we need to continue to grow and progress according to the divine plans of evolution. And that is, those plans bring in more fairness, equality, justice, mercy, love, and compassion for all human life. And it is the way, and it is the way of life that we would have developed by now, a more fair, equitable, and just society, had we not been influenced by what the rebels wanted to put in place. So right now, what's underway is a massive compensatory plan by our deity creator parents, who are the patterns of perfection for male and female relationships. And they are giving us a massive infusion of spiritual energy, light, love, and life to infuse our entire being, our minds, our bodies, our energy system, and our entire planet, so we can get back on track. Now, this is not going to happen in a single generation. It's going to take many years. And we are in the early stages of this massive rehabilitation plan. And we're about 30 some years into it. So one of the first phases is this massive awakening that's underway. And during the awakening, people are starting to feel this, what you might call unloosening of the tethers of our consciousness tied to the rebellion agenda. So that's one of the factors that we see occurring now, with people becoming so agitated, and their emotional bodies are so like on tenterhooks. It doesn't take much to set a person off. And one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of these exacerbated shootings and all the negativity coming out is that this is the kind of what you might call the blackness in the human heart showing itself. But it's there for a reason. It's there to make it visible to us that this is a way of life that has been very destructive, not only to humans, but to the whole ecosystem of the planet. And do we want to participate in this agenda, or do we want to change course and develop our spiritual gifts and qualities that are hardwired into us as gifts from our Creator to change course and to bring in and construct a heavenly culture along with all of the spiritual help and helpers that are assigned to this planet to help us make this great change. So that is kind of it in a nutshell. And there's a lot of different ways to take it from here. So Alfred, I'm just going to kind of go back to you and see if there's any particular thread you'd like me to follow now based on our earlier conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that you've really set a good stage here, and that is that our planet in this solar system, in this galaxy, in our particular universe, is in the condition that it's in because of exopolitically historic roots, which we can document and study. And that is because this planet suffered a historic default of its, what can I say, its trustees in the omniversal sense. You know, there's a universe which is the kind of sphere of time, energy, space, and matter. And that's kind of the material world that all of us who incarnate here inside of 3D avatars, Alfred, our bodies, and we experience the material world, and we experience now in these times on our planet, some people say, well, increasing chaos or breakthrough, depending on where one's focuses one's perceptual apparatus. And what I like about the perspective that you just expressed is that bringing to focus the fact that historically we've just gone through an historic civil war, a rebellion, a civil war in heaven, put it that way. Yeah. There was a civil war in the omniverse, inside of the spiritual dimensions, which has had repercussions as above, so below, in our particular universe, in our holographic universe, in our time-space hologram that we know as Earth. And that now, to the extent that that has been cleaned up in the spiritual dimensions, now we're in the process of it being cleaned up in these dimensions here. Even though it might seem that things are really getting messy, it's kind of the latter stages of the cleanup or the process of breakthrough, that is, of complex systems going to a higher order, but that there is a divine caringness that is behind it. It is not devolving, but rather evolving. Is that kind of what you're trying to say, or? part of it?
Yes, that's a good way to kind of frame this next part to discuss. Now, the Urantia book's account of the rebellion states that there were 36 planets, including our, in addition to ours, that followed the Luciferic Manifesto. And those planets, I believe, some of those planets have had a very important, or you might say insidious, influence on our planet. They could have been at a higher level of development than we were at that time, technologically, socially. And when you look at what the system of the rebellion planets wanted to do, Lucifer wanted to develop his own, what we might call universe or omniverse. He wanted to set up his own little kingdom. And so he got these 37 planets to set up their system according to his rules and regulations, which was antithetical to the divine plan. He wanted to speed up evolution. He wanted to give primitive evolutionary humans the freedom to do whatever they wanted to do without any repercussions. And it's like giving a 2-year-old a loaded handgun. You can't do that. The child doesn't have the maturity and responsibility to understand what the repercussions are of having a weapon. And so I believe, and I think one of the things that you've done so masterfully in many of the programs that you've done with your guests is to paint this bigger picture of these other planets who were involved in the rebellion that have had an influence here, a very adverse influence here. Now, these planets are now all being kind of brought into the fold with this agenda of what you might call adjudication to help these planets turn around and get back on course with the divine plan. Now, I don't have a lot of information about those planets and what status they are presently or which planets they are. You know, there's been a lot of discussion on your station and in other webinars about who these planets are. You know, I've heard the word draconians, Orion system. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there was other planetary influence on this world that was part of the Luciferic system to keep this system going. And this all came to an end right around the early, I think, mid-1980s, when messages started coming through from different people who were receiving higher information from the heavenly realms, that now this was the period of adjudication. The correcting time agenda was being brought in. The circuits, the interplanetary circuits that were severed, spiritual circuits and other circuits that were severed during the time of the rebellion to keep us quarantined from the rest of the universe so we wouldn't infect that with the rebellion agenda. Those circuits are now restored. And in the restoration was this massive outpouring of all these different benevolent personalities, angels, healing helpers, ascended souls from other planets who had further divine experience or spiritual experience, now coming here to teach us the ways of the heavenly realms. And this period of time is known in some Urantian quarters as the correcting time. It is a massive rehabilitation time, not for just this world, but for the other worlds also caught up in the rebellion. And each planet, I believe, has its own, what you might call, plan of correction, because each planet was at different stages of its evolution when the rebellion, when they decided to participate in the rebellion. So I'm going to talk more about what is happening here, because this is something that I became involved in the early 2000s, when I started to make more direct conscious contact with our spirit parents, who in the Urantia book are known as Christ Michael and Mother Spirit, and sometimes she's called Nebudonia after the name of our universe, our local universe called Nebadon. Now, our parents are the pattern personalities, spirit personalities for our divine, or for our, our masculine and feminine qualities. And they started to make contact with a number of humans who were aware of them already, to engage with them in more active dialogue and experience, so they could actually instill or infuse or download their divine parental male-female qualities into us. And this is part of the massive correction, because the rebellion agenda and the beliefs of spawned of the rebellion are threaded through every institution. And so it's like our whole system of how we think and feel needs to get this divine repatterning now. When the rebellion happened here on the planet 250,000 years ago, there was what you might call a spiritual civilization on the planet. This was in the area of around, I believe it's in Turkey or in the Middle East, and it was called Dalmatia. And this civilization was the heavenly realms coming to this planet to help the indigenous humans evolve a heavenly culture. Now, this takes place over thousands of years of evolution. And in the Urantia book, they talk about the different ages of planetary life and what are the objectives, the evolutionary objectives to be achieved during these certain phases that will lead up to what you might call a more utopian or heavenly culture that we are eventually going to achieve one day, but it is far distant. Well, this early culture was administered by the term they use in the Urantia book, the trustee or the planetary prince, and he is an unseen being. But he had a staff of 100 corporeal beings that volunteered to come from other worlds to assist in the development of the indigenous culture, to understand more of the ways of the divine realms. 60% of those 100 humans followed the rebellion agenda. And the head of that group was called Nod. He was the head of the Commission on Business and Industry. And he and his cohorts maintained this rebellion agenda. And so they started to evolve how they were going to run business and industry and other institutions along the rebellion agenda, which was basically there were three main directives in Lucifer's manifesto. And these are very significant. And I'm going to go back to it a little bit. I'm just kind of framing that right now. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is these human rebels who followed Lucifer's plans had major impact on the evolving institutions of business and industry, politics, governance, health and industry. And there were 40% of the prince's staff who stayed loyal to the divine agenda, to Michael's plans, Christ Michael's plans of planetary ascension. So this is where the roots come from, the roots of all of the things that we're seeing now, which are the effects. The cause was the rebellion. And in this rebellion mindset, it's all about separation from divinity, separation from the rest of the universe. We're going to do it our way. And so this type of separation mentality is still what you might call a very large planetary thought form or a belief system. The separation idea is based in the fact that Lucifer said, we don't want this divine plan to be a part of our universe or our system that we're developing. We're going to do it our way. And so in this separation idea, it kind of splinters the way we have been conditioned to think and feel. You know, there are so many different religions on the planet. And instead of people coming together in unity and finding the different aspects of the different religious beliefs that we have in common, the more usual approach is to look at what we have as differences and then to fight wars about these theological differences instead of coming together in a unity consciousness. So this is one of the biggest forms that the rebellion did. And we have now been conditioned to think more or less in an either or proposition and not in kind of like an and context. You know, a lot of the ways that this affected our relationships with deity was to Lucifer's pronouncement that there was no first source and center deity creator, that it was all just energy. Well, this is still playing out now when we hear people talking about, oh, I don't believe in God, but I believe in love. Well, love exists in personal relationships. It has to. You can't get love from a thing. Love only comes from relationships. And we have a relationship with our deity creator. And what Lucifer said was, no, that doesn't exist. So right there's a separation in our innate relationship that we have with our creator parent. And it's still threaded through this institution of religious beliefs and other areas of planetary thought. It's so insidious, and we don't even know that it's impacting us. So these are some of the forms that are now being outworked. And the message that I want to convey to your listeners is that we have wonderful, benevolent, loving parents, a mother and father of spirit, who know us and love us more than we can ever love ourselves. They know us better than we know ourselves. And all they want to do is to reestablish that trust bond that Lucifer broke in us about that wonderful, loving quality, that relationship we can have with Spirit, who promises to help us develop and grow as children of such creative potential that we can indeed create this heavenly culture on earth. But we need help. We're not going to get it from our current planetary system. It has to come from within, from that deity relationship, feeding us from the internal wiring that we have with Spirit that is existent in every person. The issue is that we live in a culture that does not honor or promote spiritual development as a worthy or laudable goal of living. And so one of the major factors of developing our spiritual relationship is developing our intuition and taking time from our busy day and going into a state of meditation, relaxation, to quiet the mind so that the deity relationship bond can be forged. How many people do that and really know that that's all it takes to start the process? So the thing that I would like to convey to your audience today is that this is a wonderful opportunity just to have that spiritual curiosity and to say, hey, is this real? Is this true? Are there spirit parents out there who want to give us the love and the validation that we never got from our human parents, or that we never got in our families or from our culture? They will validate every individual who comes to them and say, you are worthy, you are valuable, you have a specific purpose for your life, and we will help you co-create that together. And this is to me the way that we are going to get out of this Luciferic agenda. When our minds start to become clear of this idea that we do not have to accept this anymore, and to start going within and listening to that inner voice that's trying to give us a better message. So that's one of the major compensatory plans that is underway. And there are so many other benefits that come from this compensatory plan of opening up to those deity relationships that we have hardwired into us. The problem is the imprint, if you will, of the Luciferic agenda is, as I said, riddled through every institution. We are influenced by those mindsets. So this Luciferic agenda acts as a big mask to the spiritual energies that we have within us. So one of the things that's happening now, if when people start to open up and have that spiritual curiosity, there is a light that comes in and it starts to shine on all that darkness within the human mind and heart. And at first, people are freaked out by it because they don't know where it's coming from. They see the ugliness within. They see their own inner frailties and faults. And because of this sequestering or the separation mentality from us, we don't know that we did not create this. And a lot of people suffer from feelings of unworthiness, and they intellectually believe that there is a loving creator who actually does care about them, but they can't feel it. They can't feel it. Their hearts are blocked. So this Luciferic mask has to be broken. It has to be infiltrated with light so truth can get in. And we're already hardwired with the spirit of truth. We're hardwired with the spirit of goodness and love and beauty. And all we have to do is start to make contact with it. And my work at the Center of Christ Consciousness is to act as a facilitator for that process, so people can open up to that inner dimension that is blocking them in a way that doesn't seem scary or frightening. It doesn't cause anxiety. Because what I do is I hold that intention for the divine parents to come in, whose energy systems, their love, their energy, their actual spiritual frequency is bigger or higher than the Luciferic energy. The Luciferic energy is very negative. It's very compacted and dense. The divine energy is light and effervescent, and it's supercharged. And when it comes in to a person's memory patterns or emotional patterns or thinking patterns, it starts to add more space. And that space contains lightness and love and peace. And it helps a person start to perceive that there is a better way. And it does this over and over again. The more we go into meditation and make contact with the spirit, that spirit, those spirit presences within us are looking to see, okay, where is the receptivity for more truth light to shine and more goodness to be infused? So this is the good news, that this rehabilitation plan is designed to get our minds clear of this virus of the Luciferic mindset, so we can start actually performing more optimally as humans with our God-given creative gifts and potential as budding universe citizens and evolving divine beings. So this is a big thing that's happening. It's huge. And, you know, a lot of times we focus on a lot of what's wrong, but I want to focus on what's right. And this is where we get out of it, when we focus on the rightness of what is happening on the planet. And a lot of times we can't see this because the negativity is so stark, but it's like, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? And there's a storm cloud over our world right now trying to clear up all this negative energy, but the sun always comes out again. And that's what we're moving toward, the sun coming out, the sun being out for longer periods of time and sustaining us, the whole planet, with these circuits. And it's not only just spiritual circuits, there's physical circuits, there's all different kinds of circuits coming into us if we just have the wherewithal and the information we need to open up to that. So I'll stop there for a few minutes and see what your thoughts are.
Sure. Well, yes, the sense that I get is that this is a time where the souls that are here on the planet, and a lot is being said about the souls here, and so I'd like to see what your thoughts are. It seems like, because you say that our divine parents are making available new circuits and energies to keep those who have talents for the New Earth cultures, to help people adjust to new energies now bathing the planet. And you can see this occurring through the endowment of divine DNA, multi-dimensional DNA that carry new codes to support the physical body's attunement to higher frequencies that heal and foster greater immunity and longevity. And so, do you think that this is something that is happening universally on Earth now? Or is there a division kind of between people who are awakening and those who are still attuned to the Luciferic agenda of war, disease, crime, and poverty, just to, that seem to have been part of the Luciferic agenda, self-orientation, service to self. What is occurring to the souls on the planet now? Are they moving along as a whole? Is there like a separation of those who are more open versus those who are not? There's the famous biblical passages: two shall be laboring in a field, one shall be taken, one shall be left. It's kind of a harvest, notions of a harvest that some are, need more processing out in the universes, kind of come to their senses and get off this agenda. What are you hearing in respect of all of this?
Well, in potential, I believe that the circuitry enhancement or the circuitry of the divine plans coming into the planet once again is resurrecting a lot of the energies that have followed the divine plan of evolution. It hasn't been the whole planet, all the time devolving. There has been planetary progress over the centuries. And these circuits now in place, in potential, have the ability to reach out to every person. But I believe that what is interfering with that is just our own free will, our own free will choice, whether or not we want to believe that there's something underway of a more benevolent and positive nature, to open to that and explore that without judgment and without ridiculing people who are truth-telling and trying to get a higher message across. So it's there in potential for everyone to tap into. But are we all the same, with the same spiritual receptivity and intellectual endowment and moral development? No, we are not. We're not all the same. Where we're equal is in that spiritual endowment. We all have a spirit of the Creator within us, and we all have these circuits that connect us to our divine Mother and Father. I believe that there have been people who have been prepared to hold the ability, the focus for these higher circuits to come in. There has to be like a ground crew on a planet who is aware of the higher dimensional realms that are willing to participate with them so they can hold the space for these circuits to come in, learn how to use them, and then apply them in service to humanity, helping other people awaken. And I believe that this period of adjudication for people to change course, to look at a different way, to look at a better way, a spiritual way of living, is what we're seeing now. And in potential, it's there for everyone, even the most recalcitrant, horrific, a person who's done the most horrific acts. That mercy is being offered to them, but it is their free will whether or not they want to choose. And there's something within this rebellion mindset that reinforces this feeling of, I am not going to relent. It's a real kind of recalcitrant energy. I see it in sessions as like a really thick, dark tar. And I know that some of your other guests have talked about this AI tar that is part of all around us. You can't see it with physical eyes, but it exists, and I see it in energy form as this very thick tar. But the good news is that it can be broken up. It doesn't have to remain like that, but it's up to an individual whether or not he or she wishes to release themselves from that insidious influence and open up to the ways of love, equality, justice, fairness, truth, and goodness. So it's a real sorting out process. And because free will is so sacred, we are given an opportunity, we're given a window of time, and I don't know how many years it might be. It might be 100 years. It might be 10. I don't know. We're giving a window of time to determine, not only individually, but as a planetary culture, do we want to participate in the correction? Do we want to get back on the divine track of evolution, forego this rebellion agenda and mindset, and participate with our brothers and sisters in the evolving multiverse that is all around us? So this is a big thing. You know, it's not something that most people are aware of, and it's very difficult to educate the average person about this when we're still very much beholden in our planetary system of consciousness of the status quo rebellion agenda. And people who have been out there on the cutting edge, like yourself, have been harassed, they've been ridiculed, and these are very potent deterrents for the mainstream culture to awaken. So it has to happen with some souls who have been kind of pre-cooked, if you will, coming to this world, incarnating into this corporeal body with their spirit already saying, okay, this is what we're going to do now. Are you willing to participate? And when people make that sacred agreement with their spirit, that spirit starts to help that person become aware of what is really going on behind the scenes, you know, with regard to not only their lives, but over, you know, in the greater picture of reality, you know, on the planet. And for some people, it's a bumpy awakening, and for some people, it happens gradually. Some people can have an instantaneous, you know, epiphany, you know, in degrees in between. But the emphasis I'd like to make here, and kind of going back to what I said before, what happened on in the rebellion, is Lucifer's directive or belief that there was no first source and center creator personality. This is a really big factor in helping us awaken to the truth of who we are. There's a concept in the Urantia book called personality. I remember my friend and colleague Byron Belitzos mentioned this in his interview with you a few weeks ago when he was speaking about his book, Your Evolving Soul. And this personality circuit is the link that we actually have with our Creator, who also gives us other spiritual endowments, so we can partner with our Creator over this long evolutionary period of time. Well, Lucifer's suggestion or directive that there was no first source and center primal creator personality negated a lot of our ability to feel that innate trust bond between divine parent and human child. And that is still a factor in place that's inhibiting a lot of people from awakening to their true purpose that is seated in us by our Creator to help us fulfill the objectives that each person has to achieve a higher level of consciousness and a higher state of living. So that's one of the things I'm seeing in sessions, especially for people who are not aware of this bigger picture, is there is this mindset, this energy system that acts as that deterrent. And the mother and father of spirit come in and know that, and they start infusing their love and their light, and especially forgiveness into a person to help that person release that, break up that goo, and as it starts to release, it comes out like this smoke, and then new codes and information are imprinted all the way down to the DNA. And that's one of the most wonderful factors of this correcting time, is that it's going into the information at the most subtle forms of our energy system to kind of like spin it around in the correct direction, because the rebellion energies took us on a different course, kind of took us in the wrong direction. And the DNA is more directionized in the right direction, and it starts relaying the information throughout the whole system of consciousness. But there are other elements or attributes of spiritual qualities that come in at a multidimensional level to help the DNA open up and imprint upon those divine qualities. And so this is a big thing that's happening if people want to awaken, but in potential, it exists for everyone. But will everyone open up to this? I can't say. I don't know. I don't know. I sure want to make it my mission to get this information out there and help as many people receive this, but that is yet to be seen, how effective that will be.
Right. Now, a lot of mention is made of the entities called Lucifer and Satan, which are mentioned in many texts and have many historical references. And could you update us and everyone on the status of Lucifer and Satan? Do they still exist? Have they been adjudicated? Have they been tried, convicted? Are they scheduled for execution? Have they been pardoned? Kind of what's going on with them and with the angels? Because I know that Timothy Wiley was writing books. Supposedly he was in touch with some rebel angels who had said, "Oh, I'm really sorry that we brought all of this travail and trouble to this planet and this system of inhabited planets with our rebellion, Lucifer rebellion." And that was kind of an ongoing communication. But could you bring us up to date on Lucifer and Satan, and perhaps what some of the rebel angels are saying and some of the ongoing change, the pace of change?
Yeah. It was around the early 90s when there were messages coming into various Urantia book study groups with people who were on the receiving end, people who would go into meditation, quiet their minds, and start to perceive these messages because the circuits were now connected. And the basic message was that the Lucifer rebellion at the system level had been adjudicated, and that those who accepted Michael's offer of mercy and wanted to repent were given opportunities to change their ways and be rehabilitated, and those that did not were made as if they never were, and that was Lucifer and Satan's demise. And so once they were gone, this massive compensatory plan was put in place to help the humans of this world and the other 36 planets get reconnected to the divine plan. And that those rebel angels and other rebel celestial personalities have been are being rehabilitated. There's a number of ways in which that rehabilitation is occurring. I do not have information about how they're being rehabilitated, but there have been other people who have brought forth messages that they are undergoing rehabilitation, and they are now cooperating with the divine agenda to bring the planet back on, get the planet back on track. However, what was left on the planet was the thought forms, or I've heard the term egregores used sometimes to depict those negative, recalcitrant thought forms that are being perpetuated in certain quarters that you speak of, through different satanic rituals and other horrible acts of, just despicable barbarity that are still here. And this is what needs to be corrected on the planet. And that is why this mercy ministry coming from the heavenly realms is here to bring this message of rehabilitation to people and saying it's very simple. All you have to do is have a change of mind and heart and say, we don't want to live this way anymore. We know there's something better. But for those who are so ingrained, and because of the, and you've spoken about this on your shows, there are these family bloodlines that are tied to the rebellion agenda. And they're going to have the hardest time whether or not they're going to choose to repent and seek the higher path. And it may be very difficult for them because the rebellion influence is so threaded into their DNA that if they let go of that, they'll feel like they're going to die. They're not going to die. They're actually going to be rehabilitated, but it doesn't feel like that for them. So that's not a lot of incentive for them to change course, although our divine parents love them and want them to come back into the family. But it's up to them. It's up to the individual whether or not to accept that offer of mercy and forgiveness. So that's about all I can tell you.
Right. Now, that's very interesting. From a certain point of view, do you think it appears that things are getting worse or better on the planet in terms of the planet veering off into a Luciferic agenda?
Personally, I think things are getting better. And I say this with the perspective of what I've been shown in my meditations and in the work that I do, that this is a necessary part of the correcting agenda. It's like we have to become aware of what we are doing so that we can make an informed decision about whether or not we want to participate in the rebellion, the sophistries, the rebellion agenda, or follow the new information that's starting to percolate within our hearts and minds. Now, for some people, this is going to be a very difficult decision, but I do believe that our parents are trying to extend the period of adjudication to give people a chance to get oriented to these higher frequencies. And what's so important about this time is that for those of us who are kind of like on the front line, we're the ambassadors for our parents. we're being called to live lives of a higher spiritual order, so that we are anchored in peace. We are anchored in serenity and composure when the institutions continue to break up more and fall away. And so when people see others, individuals who are not freaking out, not, on all these mind-altering drugs to anesthetize us from the pain, when people see other people, that kind of puts a little thought in their mind. Why aren't you freaking out? What do you have that makes you so peaceful? Why are you feeling this way? And that's what they're looking for, to build up a group of individuals who are so anchored in spirit that we can hold that feeling and space of peace and composure when it looks like all of these things around us are falling apart. Because there is a much better social order that is being created. And it's not happening at the levels of governance. It's happening at a grassroots level. It's happening through the development of loving relationships, person to person. And this is what is so important about this time. It's all about the healing of relationships. And one of the biggest relationships that has to be healed is in the family. And when you think about these bloodline families that have been perpetuated by the rebellion agenda, what are they doing in those family dynamics? It's Satan worship. It's awful. And what a better way to perpetuate a mindset than to break up the relationships between men and women, parents and children, brothers and sisters. And so they're looking for, our parents are looking for those individuals who are willing to develop these, extraordinary loving relationships, so that we are so anchored in this love connection network field that we're providing this greater container for other people to feel that love and be encouraged to seek that for themselves. So this is one of the dynamics that is now underway. And I do see that. I see a lot of people recognizing that this way of life isn't right. And they want to develop more loving relationships. And that's all it takes. Even if they don't even understand the bigger picture behind the scenes, that doesn't matter. If you're willing to start acting in a more loving, positive way, and get rid of your anger and judgment, that's the new social order right there, starting to percolate and replicate all over the planet. And so this is what we're kind of in now, this developing these more positive relationships. Because a lot of people will only recognize the power of spirit through another person. And, that's why I think Jesus was so effective in his human life ministry. He just exuded love, and he was a love magnet, and people were drawn to him. And that's what people need to see. They need to see people who are acting as way showers of depicting love in the midst of anger. When Jesus talked about, forgiving your enemy 70 times 7, this is part of it, growing in those spiritual fruits that our parents provide to us, so we can get bigger in our own energy systems to convey that heart signal to a person's emotional system to help them feel more loved and validated. And we can do that for one another. And that can be a very wonderful catalyst for a person to open to their own spirit within and their deity relationships with their parents, their spirit parents.
Yeah. What does the Urantia book say about the anecdote of Jesus throwing the money changers out of the temple? Do you recall?
Well, actually, he didn't really throw them out. The story in the Bible is a little bit distorted. The Urantia book's account was that when he came upon the situation in the temple with the money changers and the animals in the pens about to be slaughtered, his heart was so full of righteous indignation and compassion for the enslaved traditions of his people that he went over and he opened a pen and he let the animals out. And that created pandemonium. And when people saw him doing that, well, they just reacted and started overturning those money changers, and all pandemonium ensued from that point. But he did not overturn the money tables. He opened the paddock. And that is not something that they talk about in the Bible, what he did. So
right. Well, it's almost a better movie scene. I mean, you can see how opening the pen to the animals leads to like this escalating kind of bottom up overturning of this Luciferic order that has been brought down from Babylon to Jerusalem through the Sanhedrin line. Still staying with this Luciferic issue, and with existing ties that here on Earth, it's now a matter of historical record that the U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower in 1954 signed a secret treaty with a number of manipulatory ET races, each of whom was probably on the side of the rebellion at the 3D and at the 4D at the 3 and 4D level, and really have been part of the mayhem and chaos that has occurred in this system of inhabited planets for the last number of millennia. And those are the Draco reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians. And it was the Anunnaki reptilians who really are most directly involved in leading to the type of Luciferic government, finance, and religions that we have that have oppressed the spiritual circuits historically. And yet, the US government had a choice in 1954 whether to sign with an enlightened group of extraterrestrials whose only condition was that the US abolish nuclear weapons, or to sign with a dark group of extraterrestrials, the Dracos, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians, who promised them even darker energy weapons and technology, and to sign a treaty which was just the opening of the door, which allowed the reptilians to, quote, abduct humans. And it was really to abduct humans for the hybrid experimentation, but also for solar system and intergalactic and planetary human trafficking, which now is probably the biggest blight that exists. One of the bigger blights that exists on the planet is human trafficking, sexual, body parts, and cannibalism. There are even news stories now that where the elite meet to greet. They have cannibal restaurants in Hollywood, in Tokyo, and so that it's now becoming chic to eat human meat. And the film stars now go to the cannibal restaurants in Hollywood, if you believe some of the magazines that are online now. And it would go along with everything else that is being leaked out of Hollywood about ritual child sacrifice and the diabolical agenda of Hollywood. The word Hollywood is actually the word for a special wooden wand that is used in conjuring up, quote, diabolical spirits. That's what a Hollywood is. And so that is the origins of Hollywood, of the American film industry. It is built on the Luciferic agenda. I even had a close friend who, it was said in the Urantia movement that Caligastia, oh, he hangs around LA. That was sort of like, gossip. So what about this treaty? I mean, we have brought up a proposal under the US Constitution. The US president can abrogate the Greada Treaty with the Draco Reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki Reptilians. I mean, if there ever is a deal with the devil, that is a deal with the devil. It seems that it's fairly well known at sophisticated levels that the United States, we've had Jay Parker on, who says that there are 40 million intergenerational satanic worshipers in the United States, that, the United States as a government has signed these deals with the satanic governments. There are other nation states that are part of these alliances that include Israel, that are satanic. If you go back to the World Zionist Movement, the World Zionist Congress, which set as its goal in the late 1800s to establish the state of Israel, which the court of which I'm a judge, the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, found was a war crime in 1948, that Congress adopted a 6-point star, which is the star of a diabolical entity, a kind of a devil that goes back to Babylon. So it seems like the United States has made all kinds of terminal deals with the devil. Now, whether that's the United States corporation that came in with the Act of 1871, where they created the District of Columbia as the third city-state after the Vatican, the City of London, and the District of Columbia as the military arm of the Vatican and the City of London. That could be. So it's not the real United States of America.
Right. Right. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
It's a Luciferic entity that was founded after the Civil War, because I come from a family, that fought on both sides of the Civil War. I grew up inside the family that had Confederate money, on the desk, and all the people that fought on the
right.
Confederate side, just kind of growing up there. And that was kind of like growing up in the aftermath of the rebellion, because it was a rebellion, right? So what's going to happen to countries like the United States and Israel that are kind of hidebound and have made these deep deals with the devil, that have the 6-pointed star, which is a symbol of the devil, that have treaties with the Dracos, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians that demand ritual child sacrifice, that demand human sacrifice, that eat human flesh, that this goes on at the underground bases. We have witnesses to that.
Well,
this goes on at the Vatican. We have witnesses to popes doing that. We have witnesses to the black nobility. You know, the most of the monarchies on the planet are satanic and Luciferic. So what's going to happen there? You know, it seems like the entire superstructure of the planet, and then I'll be quiet, but what the Anunnaki reptilians gave us to control us, which were government, money, and religion, all of which are Orion-type technologies of control, are all Luciferic and satanic, and were part of the occupation of the rebellion. So how are we going to throw those off where it seems like the United States and Israel have made deep deals with these reptilian civilizations that are kind of the working, they're still back with the Luciferic forces. So what do you hear in the correcting time? Kind of phase it. How do the circuits work? Is it that they're awakening the humans? Do those circuits also reach the Dracos, the Orions, and the Anunnaki, so that all of those entities that are operating in 4D around the planet now and that are manipulating us to still carry out wars, is that part of the leavening of the planet,
yes,
them as well?
Yes, I believe it is. I don't have a lot of direct information, but I have kind of pieced together my own, this is my own opinion. Now, it's not based on anything other than my own inner guidance and looking at the situation from a lot of different perspectives. But I do believe that those other planetary, off-planetary influences were a part of the rebellion, and they are being addressed at the level of which they need to be addressed by our divine parents who have put together this correction plan for the entire 37 planets that went into rebellion. And each planet has their own, what you might call, plan of correction that's unique to their particular needs, their social, moral, spiritual development. This is a huge, huge undertaking. This is the biggest story there is in our sector of the universe. And how it's going to play out, I cannot say because I don't have access to that information. But I do know from very concerted study of the Urantia book that there are spiritual beings who they are called the Most Highs, who do have influence within the kingdoms or the governments of humanity, all human races, and that they are kind of keeping their pulse on what's going on now. So I think that all of this Luciferic system is being dismantled. How it's being dismantled and how long it's going to take for the full dismantling, I cannot say. I don't have access to that information. I believe that there are factors or personalities, spiritual personalities working in the different areas of planetary governance to help switch, if you will, the energetic charge of thought and feeling within those institutions. As a matter of fact, one of the services I provide is to work with the head of the planetary seraphim, who are charged with working in the 12 areas of our planetary institutions to help the consciousness evolve to reflect more of the heavenly divine culture. I do this twice a month on a Sunday. It's a conference call, and people are invited to join in. We're working with the angels of the races, angels of enlightenment, angels of progress, presently, to build in these spiritual energies in the collective that will reach down into what you might call more conscious, direct levels of our human system of consciousness to feed us with better information, to break up the Luciferic patterns, and to give us more truth so we can make that own determination, assessment, discernment within our own minds and hearts. So that's one way that I believe it's happening. And so if it's happening like that on our planet, I'm sure it's happening like that on other planets, because every planet probably has a seraphic angelic core that is helping its collective evolution to a higher culture. But this is such a massive undertaking that it is not going to happen in a single generation. And we have to, one of the things that we as humans have a hard time doing now is being receptive to authority figures. And our Divine Mother and Father are authority figures, but they're not the same type of punitive, condemning, self-centered, angry, judgmental authorities. They are benevolent, they are loving, they are supportive, they are nurturing. They will provide us with the actual spiritual tools and resources we need so we can make the corrections here in our culture as well. And this is one of the biggest factors that we need to be aware of, is that as authority figures, they are trying to establish within us, through our relationship with them, a sense of trustworthiness in their benevolent nature. Because the nature of authority in us, how we respond to that harsh, punishing, authority, judgment, you're a sinner and you're going to go to hell, that kind of thing. That's all made up garbage. That just doesn't even, it's not even real. It's just scare tactics by the rebels to keep their system going. So when people start making that switch and start to feel that level of trustworthiness in the divine parents, then it's a lot easier to say, yes, I want to improve the quality of my life. I want to learn how to be loving and more compassionate and non-judgmental. And here's another little thing that is really, really cool that I've tapped into. When Jesus was here, now here is the creator of our universe, Christ Michael, who incarnated on this world because we were so backward and primitive and barbaric that he decided to come here and show how to live a spirit-centered life and to depict the nature of the creator, the loving nature of the creator to humanity. He knew that there was going to be a correcting time. He knew that he was going to bring this world and the other planets back into the family of love. He knew that. So when he's here on the planet, what's he doing? He's depositing patterns of thinking and feeling and responding to people based on love and compassion and understanding that we can actually tap into. And when I'm doing sessions with people, inevitably, this Jesus circuit comes in to support that person. And I tell people, you can go to Jesus, any human problem you have, whether or not you know Jesus or you love him, or just ask him, who are you? Show me who you are. Share with me what you have learned from your human experience. And he does that. And when that energy comes in, it's like a person can take a big breath, and that weight is lifted off of their energy system, and you can feel some relief, and then this massive infusion of compassion and love. And understanding comes in that stretches a person's perspective and helps them see beyond the limitations of whatever problem was put in, on their path that perplex them. So it's a big thing that's happening, and all these spiritual circuits coming in now are here to support us and to supplant that Luciferic mindset that everyone has within them to various degrees. Now, these bloodline families, that's going to be a little bit different. I don't know how our parents are going to correct that one. I really don't know, because it's so ingrained, so embedded in their DNA. Like I said earlier, if they start to feel like they want to change, they're going to get that sense that this energy is speaking to them. Oh no, if you let go of this, you will die. So I don't know if these people are going to have to leave the planet and be rehabilitated at another level, another dimensional level. I don't know. But I do know that this correction, circuitry correction enhancement is for everyone. But that individual has to make that decision on his or her own. It's not going to be made by another person. We have to make it individually for ourselves. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we're just having a conversation here, and this is something that just occurred to me because what about for those people who may be listening now or who are out there as part of the population, and you have 2,000 years of appropriation or disinformation or religious warfare about the persona of Jesus. I mean, to where there's huge amounts of disinformation about Jesus, so that to many people, he's been taken over by the right-wing fundamentalists. So he's, you sinner, just like you said, you're going to be cast down into hell. So that you just kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And, so this amounts to a fairly substantial reframing. How do you find yourself in your own mind, and when speaking to others, kind of reframe people about this whole issue of Jesus?
Yeah. That's a good question, and it's a sticky one for many people because of the bias around the way certain Christians what they've done, and just the general religious bias there is threaded throughout all of the religious beliefs that my religion is better than yours, and I have the truth and you don't. That's part of the Luciferic sophistries, that kind of divide and conquer mentality. I just encourage people to play with it, Ask Jesus if he's real. Take time on your own inner journey to say within, hey, if you're real, Jesus, show me who you are. I really don't know. I mean, I've heard all these things about you, but I don't know. Show me who you are. And he will show up. And there are many people who are now having religious experiences with Jesus who have completely discounted him in the past, and he's showing up in various ways. I've heard some friends who have acquaintances in the New Age, which has been largely devoid of this personal aspect of God as a creator deity personality, and you can have a loving relationship. And I just encourage people to have that curiosity to say, hey, if you're real, show up. And my friends have told me that they've had reports from people who have opened up to Jesus, and they've had experiences with him, and it just kind of came out of left field. But see, that's the nature of the mercy and the ministry now available to us, is if there's any little modicum of interest, boom, it will help a person and take them into that next step. You know, to me, another way to open up to who Jesus is, read part 4 of the Urantia Papers, The Life and Teachings of Jesus. You know, I was raised in a traditional Christian church. I went to a Lutheran Sunday school and 2 years of the most awful dead catechism that was just about wiped any interest out of God and Jesus in me. But something in me kept saying, no, just keep it in mind. So when I left the church at age 18 or 19, I didn't know what I was looking for, you know. And then I found the Urantia book a couple years later, and when I read The Life and Teachings of Jesus, I fell in love with him because he was real, and his human life was the most compelling story because it talked about all of the challenges that he faced and how he faced them, and the superb symmetry of his noble personality that he crafted because of his faith in God. And when I read that, I said, I want that. I want to be like you. And that's kind of how I started the ministry of the Center for Christ Consciousness, not to be like Jesus, but to develop my consciousness along those lines. So I say to people, have the curiosity. Just ask that question and keep pressing in until you get that satisfying answer, because he has actually hardwired himself into our hearts through the Spirit of truth. And he is there alive in us if we just have the ability to get outside of the dogma that's been forced, spoon-fed down our throats and say, there's got to be something else. And he will show us the truth of who he is. And it's wonderful when that happens because he's real. He's alive and you feel that. And it's just so good, so good. It's just wonderful. And that's what the Spirit is there to show us all along the way, not just Jesus, but as a human compatriot, but also as our Spirit Father, who intimately knows the human experience, especially as it's lived on a rebellion world, and he knows how to get us out of it. And along with the divine feminine energies of our Mother Spirit, who is the womb of our consciousness, she's just bursting out all over the place. And she is coming into these ancient circuits where all this wisdom of the past that has been aligned in the universe laws has been suppressed by the rebellion. That's breaking ground, kind of like coming up from Mother Earth. And a lot of people experience this divine feminine energies as Mother Earth energies, but it's coming from our mama, our universe mama, who's opening these circuits now to connect into us so we can feel that breath of life and that spaciousness in her, so that it gives us more room to consider these new ideas that are so, they're very different, and it takes people a while to wrap themselves around these new thoughts and to explore and experiment with them. But Jesus is there as our brother. Christ Michael is there as our brother father. We have a mother in spirit who is just feeding us with all that positive feminine energy, which is loving and compassionate and gathering us all together as one. And so these are the circuits that we have access to now that will repair all the ways that we think and feel, our entire system of consciousness, including our bodies, and help us grow up and be the caretakers of this planet that we were always designed to be. And then the rebellion continues to lose its influence. It loses its influence, it diminishes. And I remember getting a message that said, one day this planet will be as if the rebellion never even occurred. And what a wonderful, glorious day that'll be. But we're on our way. We're not there yet. We got a way to go.
Oh, yeah. Now, you write that new energies are being made available to us as compensatory measures from what we have suffered from the planet. It's truly a remarkable time on the planet. And I've been told that what is occurring upon Urantia, Earth, I kind of like that. Urantia, you are and that's Earth. Like Earth evolved from that. is unprecedented. Now, so there's all kinds of hopeful feeling. You know, people feel, oh, that's ascension. We're moving into 5D. You know, we're really moving into 5D. We're moving into paradise on earth. We're moving into heaven on earth. We're moving into our full DNA. We're becoming the new humans. We're becoming the more capable, and all of the things that one can explain through all of the traditional tools of exopolitics, parapsychology, and all the sciences that we normally see. Now, what you're revealing here is an additional layer, an additional intelligent layer, and that is that not only that, but there's a personal God, a male-female God, Christ, Michael, and Mother Spirit, Nebudonia, who are responsible for this local universe, that are focused on this because we had a blowout in our universe. We had a rebellion in our universe. We had an American Civil War. Let's call, you know, I mean, that's basically, that it means, the Civil War means a lot to me because I grew up inside of a Civil War family where my grandmother would talk about it every night at the dinner table because she grew up in New Orleans where General Butler came in and destroyed the whole city, destroyed our families, you know, all the property. It was just decimated, right? And so it was like growing up inside of a family that was like decimated. I mean, that side of the family has also had families on the Yankee side. And so, but so I can understand that feeling. I mean, growing up around a country that's still recovering from the Civil War, because I grew up around that in my own family. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like there's a process going on here, which is about the Lucifer rebellion. And hey, folks, that's really what's going on. We're really kind of getting it together from the Lucifer rebellion. And hey, if you join this particular meme or this particular thing, this is where it's really, really happening. And that is in the correcting times, because that's what's coming from source. That's what's coming from Mother, Father, God. Yeah. Okay? That's the essential message here, as compared to other messages which are God-oriented also, and service to others also. In other words, what is the fine-tuning point here? Do you find that people really get that point or not?
No. It's going to take a lot more time. Even the Urantia book was given to our planet about 100 years premature to its more general acceptance in what you might call a more mainstream population. So it's really up to those of us who are what you might call on the cutting edge of this information to share it with as many people as possible, to open doors of receptivity in people's hearts and minds, and then to live more exemplary lives of those very principles that we espouse to be the way showers and truth revealers to our brothers and sisters. And this puts a lot of responsibility on us, because we really do have to grow up as an individual and act maturely. And, there are times when I, just want to just chuck it all, because it's a big responsibility. But in the long run, it's very, very edifying to develop this relationship with our parents, because these are the source of the qualities that we need for these divine masculine and feminine qualities that we deem so noble or attractive in human life. And the fact that most people don't understand this yet is part of the long trajectory, if you will, of this correction agenda that has to occur over a period of time. It's, you know, when I listen to some of your guests on the show and they share a little bit of their anxiety or their concern about what's going on the planet, you know, my heart goes out to them, because I really see that they're struggling to understand what really happened on this planet. And you know, I feel so blessed to have this perspective and of what happened with the rebellion, and now to know that this compensatory plan is here, and it just wants to help everyone who has the open-mindedness and open-heartedness to accept the benevolence of what our parents are providing to us. And because we don't live in a culture that honors spiritual growth as a real true purpose for life, it's very difficult to get this message across to people. And so that's one of the things that I'm involved in, is with working with these celestials, these seraphim, to actually, I have a group of people we meet on the phone, and we're focusing on these circuits of the consciousness to help bring in more truth light, so more people can pick up on those higher signals, so that there's something happening from like the earth plane level up and the heavenly realms down, to put that spiritual pressure on our minds and hearts to feed us with information. So people will sometimes get this signal within, there's a better way, consider this thought. And that's their spirit working within them to help them all awaken. And you know, when they do awaken, they're sent out on a path, and the internet is a great means to find other people who can help them, people who have spiritual awareness of what's going on, to guide them through this maze of what we're going through. And that's one of the services I provide, is to hold that space for people to get the higher circuitry come in, so that their minds are functioning better, and to help them with that perspective of what's going on, to give them a sense of security and peace, that you can ride through this time on the wave of peace and assurance that you're going to be fine, and, you know, not succumb to the chaos and the confusion that so many people are just dealing with, and it's unhinging them in many ways. So it's a real, you know, you know, when you think about the epic battles of right versus wrong, goodness versus evil, we are right in the midst of it right now. It really is a big sorting out process, and and I know who's going to be successful. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take, and people want this now, because we're all conditioned to have immediate gratification, and that's not the way of evolution. We have to learn more patience and perseverance with the process that was set up in place originally. So
now,
lots of big things coming in.
yeah, you said something very interesting that I had never heard before. You know, in the years, almost 40 years since I really became a reader of the Urantia book, or since I initially read the whole thing. And that is that it came in 100 years before its time. And it struck me because my wife, Jerry, says to me, "Alfred, you're 100 years before your time." When I get kind of like, why don't people see? And so I was wondering, could you share with us, is that just a figure of speech, or is that something that you heard, that it came in 100 years before its time, or what?
Well, I've been involved with the Urantia revelation since 75, and then I was married to a gentleman who worked at the the headquarters in Chicago for a number of years. So I heard a lot of the kind of the behind the scenes information.
Yeah.
That when the papers were coming through in the 20s and 30s and 40s, they were told to not publish them until they gave the signal, which was around 1955. And so, you know, it was from that point, 1955, that I heard that the revelators made comments, probably to the contact people who were receiving this information, that it was premature. In terms of its general receptivity, the mainstream population. But they were putting it on place now because we needed it now, because they saw that our technological advancement was far outpacing our moral and spiritual development, and they were really worried that we were going to just, you know, annihilate ourselves, and they wanted to stop that. So that they gave us this book, so in testing the waters of receptivity to see where there would be interest. And you know, now it's been kind of like a quiet insertion into the planetary consciousness. It's now got translations into many languages. There are study groups all around the world. It's one of those things that is quietly changing the consciousness of the planet. And I believe that as more truth light comes to the planet, as more of these spiritual circuits are infused throughout people's minds, that there will be a lot more receptivity to the higher principles and concepts of the book. Because the book is, let's say it, it's 2,100 pages, it's big information. It's written in a way that literally will expand your conceptual frame of reference. And it will stimulate a moral compass in one's heart. And so it's a big thing to study the book. It's not a book you can read just in one short sitting or read it once. It is a study, and you can go into it with, you know, increasing depth and understanding. And I know I've gained a lot over the 40 plus years that I've been reading it. My understanding is much more broad than it was when I first started. So it's a wonderful tool for people who are very spiritually hungry and curious at this time to read. And even though it will stretch you, and people will sometimes say, I don't even know what I'm reading, just read it. You know, there's a spirit in you that's going to translate that information into something that you can more easily digest and understand. But for the general public, when you look at the scope that it's portraying, it's still a big jump for a lot of people to think that, you know, we're not the only planet out there, and the universe is much bigger and populated with so many forms of intelligent life that will just stagger our imagination. That's a big jump for many people to take.
Yeah, I still remember very strongly when I was first introduced to it, and that is where Dr. Philip Bliss and myself were on an all-night radio talk show at Princeton, New Jersey on Christmas Eve, 1973. And we ended the radio talk show, and waiting for us in the studio were two readers of the Urantia book with the book.
Wow.
And it took me from then until 1979, 1980 in Melbourne, Australia, when I had just an open time to really get in depth in it. However, I just wanted to point this out. Isn't it interesting that it was in 1955, a year after the signing of the Greada Treaty with the Draco reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians in 1954, by Dwight Eisenhower, who chose not to go with the enlightened ETs, but with the diabolical ETs in 1954 with the Greada Treaty, that then the Urantia Commission, it's an interdimensional that word, said, okay, in 55, we've got to accelerate our timetable 100 years ahead of our time, and we've got to bring this in 1955, starting in 1955, which is a year after 1954, which is the year of the secret Greada Treaty. And we now have a proposal before the current president of the United States, where the great-granddaughter of President Dwight Eisenhower, Laura Eisenhower, has stated that she would go into the White House with, supporters to say, okay, sign this. If you're going to abrogate the climate treaty, well, abrogate this treaty, because this is a treaty that's important. So that tends to support some of the analysis that we've done. And you're stating that kind of gives me, at the personal level, validation that, oh, Alfred, you're 100 years ahead of your time. And that is that maybe I wasn't scheduled to come in until 2042. But that when the Draco...
No, we needed you now.
And the Draco reptilians got together, they had to so I had to come, they had to bring in a Scottish, Cuban, American, Canadian judge and lawyer to really begin to, help people through this stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
With our crew. But, as you said, who's just one more member of the ground crew, because it looks like our ground crew is really amazing. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, what I just wanted to say is your spirit knew your potential, and apparently you were needed now, and you are needed now. And this is a wonderful thing, because the world needs pioneers. The world needs people who have that far-seeing perspective, who can come back and say, take a look at this. Don't take my word for it 100%. Go in, do your own inner scrutiny and inner search. And this is a big problem, that people have been kind of conditioned to be spiritually, intellectually lazy, and don't take the time to do the inner search and develop the intuition that is necessary to use in the discernment whether these things are true or not. And this is why this spirit of truth that's coming from our divine father Michael is so important right now. Is he is the living truth, and he will tell all of us what the facts are if we're willing to come to him. But you were needed now, Alfred, and so don't think that because you were born 100, your wife said you were born 102 years too early, that your life would have been different somehow. It probably would have, but you're needed now, because the message that you're conveying is pivotal to helping people understand the context of what we're dealing with. If you don't have context, then you can't find the real resolution. And the real resolution is develop your spirituality. Develop your relationships with your deity parents and your spirit within, and you will be anchored in something so grounded and strong that you can ride this crazy time out with peace and assurance that we're moving into a wonderful new way of life here, that we, each one of us, can participate in co-creating through our own unique God-given gifts. And so your gifts are many gifts, and you're using this wonderful venue of the internet to share your gifts, and that's what all of us are supposed to be doing, because we all have the ability to do that if we want to tap into our personalities and our God-given potential. We have the ability to do that.
Now, speaking of the internet, this certainly wasn't available when I began reading the Urantia book, and that is that the Urantia book is available online. Now,
yes.
Could you tell people something about that?
Well, there are a number of websites that have the book online, and there are even now Urantia book schools for for people to sign up and study the book with seasoned readers, readers who have a lot of experience with the concepts, who can break things down and help people understand the bigger philosophical, theological implications of the teachings. So if you just do a search on, I think one is urantia.org, truthbook.com. There's something called the UBIS School, but I think if people just put a website search of Urantia, URANTIA, it'll bring up a lot of resources, and you can easily find the book online. There's a comprehensive index. You can view the table of contents, which breaks down the different papers and the sections within them. It's just a marvelous, marvelous study. And there are a lot of accomplished readers out there who can help individuals who are starting out make sense of it all. And you know, if you participate in a study group online or an online class, you'll get a lot of benefit from it. It really is not the kind of book that you should study on your own without some other help, you know, who can kind of answer the questions, and because there's so much there, and it just takes a while to absorb it all. You can only absorb a little bit at a time. So, but I do encourage your audience, if they really want to get the biggest perspective, I believe this book is the best resource on the planet to provide that. From the more the intellectual basis, and then from more the experiential basis of opening up to the new information, the circuitry, to spend time quieting your mind, ask questions: who is there? Who are you? Show me who you are, and develop those relationships with deity parents. And that's one of the services I provide. I help people open up those circuits that are still maybe have this interference of the rebellion agenda, to get more clarity so they can develop their own relationship and feel the innate integrity and authenticity of their own God-given personality gifts. And it's been just a wonderful delight and blessing to be able to help people in this way. It's just great to see how people open up and begin to blossom and cast off all the unworthiness, feelings of unworthiness and guilt or shame, and the sense of they can't do things, and they start to find creative potential. So the revelation that the Urantia book speaks about is both conceptual and experiential. And I believe that if people take the time to explore both dimensions, it will enhance and enrich their lives immensely and bring them great peace and joy and happiness.
Well, thank you. And so if people want to keep in touch with you, I know that you are affiliated with the Center for Christ Consciousness. Could you tell us more about the center and what the Center for Christ Consciousness is, and what that is all about and your work there?
I started the Center for Christ Consciousness in 2002 as a means to help people open up to more of the experiential nature of the relationship that we have with deity. I had been trained to transmit celestial messages for a number of years. That began in 1992. And it was a few years later I started receiving messages from Christ Michael and Mother Spirit. And so I started the Center for Christ Consciousness as a means to help people be introduced to the concept of the deity parents and receive messages from them. And I transmitted messages when I was in my home when I was living in California over the course of several years. But I moved out of the San Francisco Bay Area a few years ago, and now I'm in Southeast Florida running the Center for Christ Consciousness as more of an online ministry, where I've written extensively about the deity relationship with our parents and our spirit. I've also written about, is that your little puppy?
Yeah, I can hear.
Generational healing, the level of healing that I facilitate that goes into the ancestral memories, into the DNA, that clears out the rebellion influence so that those ancestral influences that have been a part of your genetic lineage are operating with the integrity that they were originally designed to have. So that there are genetic markers in our DNA that respond to spiritual energy to help us develop certain qualities within us so that we can build a heavenly culture. And so I facilitate sessions for people. I help people get in contact with their angels or their teachers or their guides. I've written 2 books. One is called Teach Us to Love, which talks about developing the relationship with one's inner spirit. And then I transmitted a number of messages and lessons from our Divine Mother and Father called Divine Mother, Divine Father. There were 100 messages to help introduce people to their divine parents. And all those books are online. I've also developed some meditation CDs and repatterning CDs to help people open up to the new codes. So it's a real full service healing transformational ministry. A colleague of mine and I developed an online course called The Art of Soulful Transformation, which is a 10-session course that's designed to help people open to their spirits and develop that more experiential part of feeling and developing their souls. And what I'm doing presently is, I mentioned, twice a month, holding a conference call for the collaboration with our planetary seraphim, so that we humans on the earth plane level and the celestials from the divine level are reaching in to change the trajectory of the way we think, moving it more toward that heavenly direction. And then I also do 2 conference calls a month on Saturdays to help people experience their divine parents. And these are free conference calls, and they're open to anyone who wants to participate. There's a contact page on my website, which is centerforchristconsciousness.org. And I'm going to be starting a new web series, about 4 weeks. I'm going to start at the end of January, about helping people orient themselves to what's going on, and just trying to get a level of understanding where people are to help them make sense of this time. So I'm going to be starting that I think on January 30th as a webinar. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, and I'm just here to help people if they feel this message resonates with them and they want to explore this inner dimension of their beings. And it's just been a wonderful experience, and I just feel so blessed that I've learned what I've learned, and just want to share that with other people, because it's enriched my life immensely, and I'm a different person now because of it. And I know that people can change and they can improve. And, an existing lot in life doesn't have to maintain that status quo. We can grow. We can outgrow this horrible legacy and really become the people that God has designed us to become. So the ministry is there as a service to whoever is interested.
Well, thank you. And so how can people get in touch with you? We'll put the website of the Center for Christ Consciousness in the article that accompanies this webinar.
It's centerforchristconsciousness.org. And then on my homepage, there's my phone number. And there's also a contact us button on the homepage, and people can email me at the CC. And I'm there to help. And I do sessions over the phone or Skype or in person. And it's energy clearing. It's getting rid of the goo, that artificial AI, that dark tar. It cleans that out, and it helps people develop that authentic sense of who they are within, that's supported by the divine parents and one's indwelling spirit. So it's
wonderful.
A good way to get yourself to spiritual attunement.
Good. Yeah, I mean, this is a very challenging assignment or opportunity or, adventure or challenge, however you want to classify or
All
frame.
of the above.
Yeah. And well, I really want to thank you for taking time out and coming with us. And I look forward to you joining us again, because this is, as I was saying, we cover the spiritual, the geopolitical, the exopolitical, and the spiritual often is not emphasized. Often it's the geopolitical and the exopolitical that kind of
Yeah.
that be heavier balance, because of that. That's where the action is, apparently, in the spiritual. It's
Oh,
hard.
there's a lot of action in the spiritual world.
I understand, and so I'm
I know.
really happy that you brought us this insight today, and that you're there doing the work that you're doing, and that I'm looking forward to your being able to join us in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfred. It would be my pleasure to join you again. And I just wish your audience a happy transformation, and let your heart be light, because this is good news and we are getting help, and we are going to bring this world back to its original divine plan and progress from that place. So God bless you, Alfred, on your sacred work, your joy, and a light in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.